Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Republicans and Democrats are going back and forth over immigration reform again. Haven't we done this before?
So there's all this conversation about what's happening on Capitol Hill regarding the immigration law. Okay, not surprising. There's a couple of points, though, that are not being discussed. And I think that's because we've got a lot of new reporters in the world and not a lot of experts that are willing to say, wait a second, doesn't this whole dance seem like familiar? Haven't we been here before? The first thing about these kinds of issues is you got to go back to 1988. You got to go back to the 80s earlier. And look at what we've done on immigration for over 40 years, how this has been a continuing problem. And when a law was passed, then it's like, okay, this is the last one we ever have to pass. This is how we've moved the end zones and the goal lines, and this is where it's going to be, and this is fixed now, and we can go on forward forever and ever and be just fine. Well, how come the problem is endlessly not fixed? And it's a process that I guess maybe we could use some COVID language from. What the left does is when they get into power or get into positions of blocking power, so if they have the White House and they can block in the Senate, then through executive orders, they will begin to control the way the laws are enforced. And by failing to enforce the laws they don't like or hyper-enforcing the laws that they prefer, they create a new normal. Then when everybody finally gets onto the fact that this is chaos, they say, well, here's what we're going to do. Here's the reform law that we really need. And what they end up doing is they end up codifying into law their new normal. In other words, if we were passing a law based on, like this was a number line, and we were at the number 3, and this was the law, and this is what it was supposed to be, then they get into power and they move the reality of how the law is enforced to a 7. When the new law comes out, it's based upon 7 being normal. So this is how they expand the influence and the role of government. And you'd think that the Republicans would finally catch on to it. And this time it appears that they have.
Yeah, for a change. People forget this. Ronald Reagan's big ding. The one thing that if Jimmy Carter hadn't been such an awful president, might have cost him the presidency a second time, was immigration and amnesty. Yeah. People forget that. So now it's become a very partisan issue. So the left is open borders, the right is closed borders, but neither party really ever solves the problem, as you eloquently laid out. There are 3 separate issues. One, are we a sovereign nation? And do we have a right to have a border? Is it necessary to have a border to be a country? And is it fair to process and limit some while we reward those who simply break in? So it's a fairness issue. It's a law and order issue and an enforcement issue. It's also a national financial security issue and a national homeland or national security issue, as you've heard me talk about it with James Carafano. So we have all of this kind of happening, and then there is a political cycle. From a political cycle standpoint, the 2 things that are driving American voters are the economy and the border. And it's interesting that the left tries to solve these during the campaign so that they're not a driving force in turnout come November. And the right seems to have wised up to that too.
Let's do a timeout right there. This is the next in the karabuki dance, or whatever you call that. The kabuki dance, is that how it works? The fake dance that's going on. The first is move the number line to the new normal. Then the next play is exactly what you just described. Let's, in an election year, bring up our new normal law while we hold power and throw it at the Republicans. That's what the Democrats are thinking. Throw it at the Republicans. And when the Republicans balk, then clearly you go back to the American people and say, here's the problem. You see, we really do want to solve these things. We know how to solve these things. It's these ignorant, extremist opponents of ours that refuse to take yes for an answer. And it's hilarious because all their editorial writers, whether they're a WAPO or the Atlantic or New York Times or whatever, they always say, what is it about Republicans that they just can't handle yes? It reminds me of the Jim Carrey movie Yes Man. It's like the Republicans are suddenly, when the Democrats say, let's sit down and talk about an issue, the standard response is that Republicans are just automatically supposed to say yes. Well, of course, yes.
The opinion piece in the Washington Post was a classic headline. Republicans will never get another border security deal like this one. Not this good. And I'm like, okay, thank you guys. But by the way, I want to give, and I also want to give people a sense that, because a lot of these things have been bad for a long time, but oh no, this is bad like we've never seen. So if you look at the monthly migrant encounter at the U.S.-Mexican border alone, and that's just one of our borders, for the longest time, and we can go back to 2002, it was at under 50,000. Then it kind of popped up above 100,000 later in that year. And then in 2004 and 5 and 6, it would peak at 150 and it would go as low as 50. So fluctuate between 50 and 150. And then you get to 2008. Now that's Barack Obama. And you start seeing the border, apparently, while he was selling hope and change here, nobody was really interested in coming. But the border was not a big issue. And the numbers were like 25, 16,000. And that held steady all the way through Donald Trump. So the question is, was this a Bill Clinton problem? And now they're both Podesta, and now a Biden problem? Well, yes, watch. In 2019, Joe Biden takes office. It jumps to 132 a month. Then it jumps in 2022 to 234,000 a month. We've never seen numbers like this ever. And then now, currently, it's at 206,000. And that's on a downtick, and it's heading back up. This is a crisis. Doing nothing, yes, you're right, kicks the can. But it's a crisis way worse than it's ever been, which ought to beg the question, what have you been doing the last 3 years? That is similar to what you were doing in the late 90s.
Well, what is clear is that the people of America are catching on. The awareness over the problem of these open borders is much higher this time than it was in 2016 or 2020. So where Trump came into this zone in 2016 and immigration was a major, major issue of his first run, now we're looking at 2024, 8 years later. And it is clear that the voters of America are catching on and catching up to this. They're getting it.
So the left's narrative is the right never wants to come and do a deal. We're giving
can't
them,
handle yes.
Yeah, they can't handle yes. We're giving them a better deal than they're ever going to get. See the Washington Post. And they don't want to do it because it'll take the issue off the table and cost them the presidency and the election. Again, everything that they accuse is usually what they're doing.
It's halftime here at 1850 Main Street. Time to freshen up that cup of coffee. You can start every morning off right by listening to Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Tune in to stations across America and online at the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day with Your Morning Show on the iHeart Network.
Second key thing on this, in this WAPO piece, and I think this is the big unveil. At least for me, it was like, are you kidding me? They actually put this in writing. So remember, we got the new normal. They've quantified and said, okay, now if you go back to the original laws that we have, forget this proposal. If Congress just enforced, if the administration and the administrative state, acting under the authority that Congress gave them, simply implemented the laws that we have, our problems would be largely solved. But they won't do that because, you see, they have played the game to the new normal. Now what they're saying is, well, what you said we were supposed to do, Congress, doesn't work anymore because look at how the circumstances changed. Well, it's changed because you changed it. Right? I mean, this is how deceitful the two political parties are. This is how they lie to each other, and they lie to us perpetually. Perpetually. So now here we are in the dance because it's an election year. So get this. This is a direct quote from the WAPO op-ed piece. Quote, fresh NBC polling shows, I got to stop. Fresh NBC polling. Doesn't that just tasty? I mean, you just want to.
Well, unlike that stale Quinnipiac, give me some fresh NBC.
Give me some fresh NBC polling shows Mr. Trump has a third. Mr.
Not president.
Right. Of course. No respect. Fresh NBC polling shows Mr. Trump has a 35-point advantage over President Biden on immigration. But this window for deal-making will close. Even if Republicans controlled the White House and Congress next year, the Senate filibuster would prevent them from having their way on this issue. Democrats will lose any incentive to deal if a president from their party no longer owns this problem. I have never seen anyone say it in real time, in the light of day, as honestly as what that just said. Let's interpret. Right now, the Democrat Party and the Democrat administration will not sit down and solve the immigration problem unless the Republicans give them
something,
this issue. And they know that if they give them this issue and resolve it, Biden will win the presidency because it will take away the Republicans' biggest issue and Trump's biggest issue. Therefore, what they're saying is, you want to solve immigration? Give us the White House for 4 more years. That's what it costs you. That's the deal.
So
That's
they're playing. All right. So
deal.
we have an open border to which human trafficking takes place, drugs enter, thugs enter, drug lords enter.
People are dying.
Terrorists
People are dying on all sides.
I mean, all
people
this
are
stuff.
dying trying to get here. People are dying. At
Never
every
mind
level.
any of that. We're going to play politics with it.
We're going to play
And here's the
politics with it.
Washington Post telling you, and this is as good as it gets for you, and you better take it.
The Washington Post is literally threatening them, saying, this is the best deal. So if you care about immigration, give us the White House and take this deal, which is a terrible deal, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But let's take it one step further. Even if you win the White House, even if you win the Senate, even if you maintain control of the House as Republicans, the other side saying, we know you won't control it with enough votes to get 60 votes past the filibuster. So we can still lose. And guess what? We win and you lose because of the filibuster.
There is a bit of a problem.
Depth of the corruption.
Yeah.
Of our government.
Absolutely. And by the way, of the 2-party system, period.
Yes.
Which doesn't really exist. It's a little short-sighted in that, I think town hall, and I know all these sites have different biases and agenda. And that's why you got to go to all of them. That's why you can't isolate yourself from CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, The Atlantic, Axios, and others. You got to know what they're up to, AP especially. You got to know what they're up to.
You're solid on this, though, Michael, because, the facts of the bill are the facts of the bill.
The facts of the bill. And town hall really breaks down. It says, number one, here's the big problems. The 5 biggest problems with this bill. Number one, it is not comprehensive by any stretch. Number 2, it doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it just makes, like you say, normal, or what James Carafano said is just legalizes the chaos and crisis. As you say, make it normal. And it fuels further crisis is what it does. But I liked where they started with number 1. Number 1 is you don't need this bill. President Biden does not need legislation to fix the border. He started it and he could finish it. And I would say through executive orders, so could the next president. You could continue the wall. You could continue enforcement. You could send troops to the border. You could stop this. That's the flaw, I'm just saying, in the Washington Post's vision. Unfortunately,
that's a brilliant point you're bringing up. He could stop this and literally
chooses
take
not
the
to.
issue away from the Republicans.
See, that's what I wanted to
by solving it. But he doesn't want to solve it. They want a deal.
But you've been in the policy business for almost 5 decades. All right. So what is the agenda game here? And we all know who we're really dealing with Soros and Podesta. What is their game? Do they like human trafficking? Do they like fentanyl? Do they like drugs? Do they like terrorists? Because I had Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, who I consider one of the foremost military and foreign policy minds in the world, let alone so does Fox News, say he believes the clear and present danger isn't the Middle East, isn't Russia, isn't China, isn't North Korea. It's our border. That's pretty frightening when somebody came right out and said America is less safe today than they were prior to 9/11, 2001. Those are profound. Where is their game here? How do they think this plays out? Economically, population-wise, drug-wise.
We have to look at the dominant theme of this debate on immigration from the Democrat side is driven by their biggest donor network, which is led by George Soros, who is the founder not just of the Center for American Progress, which is the think tank that runs the Democrat White House and has since the days of Obama, actually since the days of Bill Clinton. Podesta was there in the Clinton administration. Then when Bush came into the presidency, that's when Podesta started the Center for American Progress in 2003 with co-founder George Soros. George Soros, his major contribution in the international global world of policy is the Open Borders Society. He is an open borders guy. Why is he an open borders guy? Because America is too big for its britches. You notice he doesn't try this open border stuff on China.
Oh.
He doesn't try this open border stuff on Russia. He just tries it on America.
Well, and succeeds. And you add abortion to that. You add climate change and gloom and doom and depression. We're not having kids. They're all coming. They're willing to turn a blind eye to the fentanyl, to the drug lords, to the human trafficking for a while to get to an end game where culture is completely reshaped.
See, George Soros can't be president of the United States, but he could be president of the world. And so what he's got to do is he's got to diminish the sovereignty and the value of America. And you do that by completely diluting the borders. You completely dilute the borders. You change the voter base. You move to all of the agenda items that John Podesta is running through Center for American Progress, and you diminish America. America is now just one of many. And with America being diminished...
Well, and an American is just where a GPS has him positioned.
Thank you. Look, America for them is just a place to do business, take money, and gain power. And by diminishing America, then that makes the opportunity for Soros and his pals to be presidents of the world. And that's they really want to restructure.
That was at the heart of Agenda 21, too. And only America's fallen for it, as you rightly said. China's not going to fall for it, although they could economically collapse. Russia's not going to fall for it. America seems to be falling for it. And I can tell you...
It's all built upon compassion. That's the tinderbox and the weakness of it. If you don't agree with them, you're a hate-filled, non-compassionate schmo. Shame on you.
No, there's no assimilation either, don't forget.
What does that mean?
There's no assimilating into God, family, country, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, everything that we really stand for. It's just a matter of where your GPS show up on a map. Oh, I'm in America. This is America now.
And how they can drain resources from America into their global cartel. It's all about the money, and it's all about the power. And Podesta has been there dumping power into their hands since the Clinton administration, and he's still doing it today.
And the Democrat Party's been bought by this. The Republican Party's been duped by this. But the good news is
Couldn't have said it better.
They seem a little less stupid this time around.
It seems
Wait a minute. So far, I had to knock on wood. It ain't over yet.
Yeah, and so we'll see how this plays out. But the thing is that this is an amazing. I just want to repeat this. I can't get over this. I kept this on my phone. But this window, Washington Post speaking, this window for deal making will close. In other words, we can have a conversation about this, but the deal will close. Even if Republicans controlled the White House and Congress, that's House and Senate, next year, the Senate would filibuster and prevent them from having their way on the issue. So if you don't do it our way, you'll never get it your way. Democrats will lose any incentive to deal. In other words, the Democrats have no internal motivation to solve this problem for the good of the nation and the people of this nation unless a president from their party owns the issue. Well, to own the issue, it means you have to own the White House. That's their lust for power. The country be blanked. The people the same. We use issues to stay in power. And they're unabashedly confessing it out loud for the world to see.
And it sits along with your perspective of whether the economy is booming or failing as what we perceive, along with, of course, democracy's soul being at stake and the great pabotch, as the three things that are going to determine this election.
The great pabotch.
We've
probably got some new people
that don't know what a pabotch is.
Conversation.
The boogeyman. Italians don't call the boogeyman the boogeyman. Italians call the boogeyman the pabotch. I had
Can
one of
you
the
spell that for us in English?
Pabotch? I have no
Is
idea.
Is that a P or a B?
P.
Is it a hard B? It's a P.
Pabotch.
Okay.
The pabotch was always in the basement. Not far from the old creepy picture of a pope or a great grandmother in the oval old frames. Remember how scary the great grandparents always looked?
Hey, I've got some of those pictures.
And then you had the smell of the laundry room not far off. And then the pabotch was lurking in the dark. Yeah, that's the pabotch. But yeah, these are the three driving forces.
Did you know that you can hear Michael and David every day on your morning show on the iHeartRadio network? You can tune in daily or log on live to the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day on your morning show. Then join us here where the conversation continues. Subscribe today so you don't miss a minute and visit 1850mainstreet.com to find out more. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.